I think you'd be surprised just how far a person is willing to go in order to get some respect. And it can be so far that there's no going back, for them and for those around them. That person was me, at the young age of 17. You see, once I really started developing my social personality in middle school, it became pretty clear to everyone that I was the shy type. Somebody who liked to lay low and blend in, rather than stand out. You might think that that's okay, and it really is, but not so much for boys, at least boys at my school. If you didn't show that you had guts, they were onto you, and I mean like a pack of hungry wolves. And while they never beat me up, they did insult me a lot and gave me a paranoia that has never left me. I strongly believe that insults can and will hurt more than physical torment, and it certainly left its mark. Anyways, once I started my years in high school, I knew I had to change, and that this was my chance to be known for being strong, courageous, and worthy of being respected. No person would ever dream of bullying me anymore. I cut my hair to look cooler, wore tougher looking clothing, and even tried to train myself using YouTube videos on how to become mentally stronger. I know my parents must have found my sudden change strange because they never knew anything about my being bullied. And I didn't think they needed to know anyways. I was going to solve this problem on my own and prove to everyone that I wasn't going to be messed with anymore. But life doesn't work wonders like that, and it's TV's fault for always making the impossible seem possible. I went into high school and got bullied regardless, and by new people. They made fun of how I tried to look like something I wasn't, and I found out the horrific truth that you can never hide what's really inside. I just was what I was, and there wasn't actually a problem with it. It was the rude people that were the problem. But I didn't understand that then and got really fed up. So fed up that I said something really stupid to them during lunch. The conversation went something like this. A group of tall, condescending guys were calling me names not suitable for children, and one of them told me that I was weak for not saying anything back. I told them angrily that I wasn't weak, and they started laughing rudely. That only got me more fired up. I told them that they were the ones who were weak, along with some other comments that immediately got their attention, and I could see their faces turning a dark red. I didn't even think that was even possible for a human to do. Then again, I've long doubted they were human. The leader of the guys put his hands up to signal for his friends and himself to calm down, and surprisingly they did. Then, he slowly walked to me, standing uncomfortably close to my face, and through gritted teeth, told me since I thought I was such a tough guy, that I should put my money where my mouth is and prove it. Being a quick thinker, I thought of the perfect plan. My parents were going to be going out tonight, and once they were gone, I would invite the guys over to play the midnight game. A game I was told by my parents' friends when I was younger. Knowing that it was just a lame thing told to spook kids, I would try to scare them myself, while making it seem like I was being brave and cool throughout the whole game. With them acting so scared, they'd realize that I was tougher than them, and I'd get non-stop respect from not just them, but maybe even the whole school. Word spreads faster than you can blink in high school, and you'd better remember that. That was my plan, and while it might not have been perfect, I'd say, in a way, it got the job done. But I'm not sure you'll agree after hearing what happened. Eager to prove me wrong, they all agreed to come over around 11 p.m. when it was dark, which was perfect because the game works best in the dark anyways. I'll be honest, I never felt more excited in my whole life. I was going to scare the life out of them. As soon as the lights went out, I would sneak up on them and get revenge. My parents left out and never told me I couldn't have friends over because they knew I had no friends at all, meaning I technically wasn't breaking any rules. I got out an old Halloween mask of a creepy bloody goblin that could easily scare the bravest of people, and an oversized black coat that would hide the rest of my body. With it being dark, I was sure that all they would see was a horrific creature that looked ready to attack. In my pocket, I kept a plastic toy knife that looked awfully realistic to use to scare them as well. Finally, darkness fell over the sky, and I waited for them to come. I heard the doorbell ring and welcomed them in. They looked mischievous and full of themselves, which was perfect. We gathered in a circle in the living room, sitting on the floor, and it took a while for them to finally shut up. In order to prove just how not weak I am and just how weak you guys are, we're going to play the midnight game. You guys know how to play? I asked. Most of the guys said yeah, but one of them shook their heads with a grin, asking me to explain it. Well, first we get out a piece of paper, I said. I'd already placed one on one of the couches, and I picked it up and sat back down in the group. In the actual ritual, you'd use your own blood to write your name, but we don't. Before I could finish talking, the leader of the guys took a short but really sharp knife. I backed away so quickly I didn't expect it. I yelled at the guy what he thought he was doing, and he looked at me like I was the one who was crazy. He said that all of us would be writing our names in blood, just like the ritual went, and stabbed himself in the finger. You could see the pain on his face, clear as day, and although it took a bit, he wrote his name in small letters on the paper. He then passed the knife around to the others, and they did the same, except one who said that he didn't actually want to do it. The leader called him a chicken and the guy left in a rush. Honestly, it was pretty disturbing to see them all do it, and I was surprised to see that one of the guys was prepared and had brought bandages for them to use. Well, the leader said, we're all here to prove how tough we are. What about you? That's when things got real. It wasn't just gonna be a joke. They really wanted to go through with this. I tentatively grabbed the knife, sitting back in my spot. My hands shook with a ferocity I'd never known before. I told myself it'd be okay, but my body knew that it was not. Come on, I thought to myself. This is what it takes to earn respect, to be a brave person. If you can't do this, you'll be known as a weakling forever. I decided that I might not feel the pain as much if I did it quickly, so I stabbed my hand as quick as I could, but I was absolutely wrong. In fact, the pain might have been stronger because I did it fast. For the next 10 seconds, I gripped my hand in intense pain. I watched as blood dripped like rain from my hand and onto the floor. Someone passed the paper my way so I could write my name quickly. Slowly, I lowered my hand towards the paper and tried my best to write my name without wincing too much. My hand started throbbing uncontrollably, but at least somebody gave me a bandage so that I could heal. Everybody in the room took a few minutes to look at the paper, at what we'd done. I had initially planned for us to just use a pencil to write our names, but it seemed like peer pressure had other plans, an unfortunate weakness of mine. The paper was stained with speckles of dark red, and our names dripped onto each other a little bit. It was a horrid sight, to say the least. You'd think we were trying to summon a demon or something. It was 11:50 when we finally finished writing our names in blood. In the ritual, after placing the paper in front of a closed door and lighting a candle, you're supposed to knock 21 times and then once more at exactly 12 a.m. No minute more, no minute less. I figured the basement door would be the scariest option, and because I knew that the ritual wasn't actually real, I wasn't feeling afraid or anything like that. To me, in that moment, the scariest thing would be us actually writing our names in blood. The rest would just be a prank I'd play on them. But you're hearing this story of mine because you know that's not what would happen. And so, me and the other guys stepped down the stairs and to the basement door, which was normally always locked, and I placed the paper on the floor in front of it. One of the guys brung along the candle and set it across from the paper. I asked who wanted to be the one to do the knocking, but no one offered, not even the leader. You're the one who wanted to prove himself the most, you do it, the leader finally spoke. I nervously nodded my head and lit the candle. The guys backed away from me, standing on the stairs as I started knocking. And I'm telling you, with every knock I did, I could feel the room getting colder. Suddenly, I could feel the house's atmosphere getting more and more unsafe, and I'm pretty sure the others could feel it too. When I first started knocking, they were snickering and giggling. When I was about to stop, they were dead quiet. And if I never turned around, I would have thought I was alone. Before I did the 20-second knock, I checked my watch. It was a minute before midnight. I watched it closely, my arm ready to deliver the final knock as soon as it turned 12. But the clock didn't change. I counted 60 seconds over and over again, but the clock remained the same. Somebody behind me asked if it had turned 12 yet, and I told them that my watch was acting weird and wasn't working. The leader walked up to the basement door and checked his watch, which was saying the same thing as mine. The others that had watches checked theirs, and it was all the same thing. It was like all of time stopped. Well, it's probably already past 12, so you might as well knock now, someone said. I moved my hand forward, but my hand stopped right before it could touch the door. Every hair on my body stood up on its end. The closer my hand was to the door, the more out of breath I was feeling. It was then that I realized. You guys, I need to tell you something, I whispered carefully. Everyone was silent. No matter what, no one can knock one more time on this door. But all the guys started complaining instantly, calling me a scaredy cat and saying that they were just getting into it, that they hadn't had this much fun in a long time. The only guy who seemed like he agreed with me was the leader. But when his friends cheered him on to make the last knock, he took a nervous laugh and knocked once, the 20-second knock. In a split second, I looked at my watch, and what I saw terrified me. The time on the watch, on all of our watches, was 000. The lights throughout my whole house flickered off, the candle being the only light available to us. But then some unseen force blew out the candle, and on the other side of the door, something kept knocking a bunch of times, each knock louder than the last. It didn't take me long to figure it out. Hide! Before the Midnight Man is done knocking 22 times! You'd think they wouldn't believe me, but they bolted off in an instant, despite it being so dark. I followed behind and ran to somewhere slightly close by, one of my bathrooms. I shut the bathroom door and entered the closet, closing it behind me. I checked my watch and it had turned off, which meant I couldn't see a thing. I went through my memory trying to remember what happens next in the game. If my memory's correct, the door opens and the Midnight Man tries to get you while you're wandering around the dark house. Every now and then you have to move or else he'll automatically find you, and the goal is to not be caught by him and to relight the candle before 3:33 a.m. or else something bad would happen. I think that he catches you if you don't. As I stood there in the dark, I knew that this wasn't a game anymore and that I needed to relight that candle as soon as possible. But the matches used to light the candle were with one of the guys, and they were the one who didn't even know how the game worked. This was really bad, because it meant that they most likely didn't know that they were supposed to relight the candle, or that they had to avoid the Midnight Man at all costs. Bang! I heard the last knock, and the basement door creaked open slowly, most likely by itself. And I'm telling you, if there's ever a moment when you feel life-threatening fear, it's at that very moment when you realize that there's no one coming to save you, and that you were the one who put yourself in that situation in the first place. I held my breath and tried to say stiller than humanly possible For the most part, it was quiet. Way too quiet. I stayed in the closet for what I'd estimate to be half an hour and knew that I had to move to a new location. I just couldn't risk the Midnight Man finding me. I don't think I've ever moved more quietly in my life. I opened the closet door, stopped to listen, and was about to open the bathroom door when I suddenly heard somewhat silent footsteps. I could tell someone or something was coming down the hallway, and even though it was mostly quiet, because the whole house was dead silent, it was loud, if that makes sense. Maybe it was the anxiety, but I felt that it was not human. As the footsteps approached, I slowly backed away and inched my hand towards the closet door so that I could hide back inside. The footsteps approached the bathroom door and they stopped. I was terrified out of my mind. I held my breath and didn't move an inch. Even though I couldn't see very well, somehow I saw the bathroom doorknob slowly turning, so I raced to the door and pushed my body weight against it. Some otherworldly force pushed back against the door and seemed to get more and more powerful. I struggled as the door slowly opened more and more until it was open enough for a person to stick their hand through. Just as I was about to be shoved away by the strength of the door, the Midnight Man stopped pushing against it and I slammed the door shut. Panting and out of breath, I leaned against it and tried to regain my composure. The Midnight Man had left, for better or for worse, and I had just narrowly survived. Somewhere in the house I heard someone yelling for their life, and I recognized it as the person with the matches. I knew I didn't want to leave the safety of the bathroom, but this game needed to end. I creaked open the bathroom door and leapt out into the infinite abyss that was my house. For what felt like hours, I wandered through the hallways with fear of what could be waiting for me. It was just me, creeping stealthily through the house that I couldn't recognize anymore, and I dared not think of what might have happened to some of the guys. After wandering some more, I realized that I had made it to the kitchen. My feet could feel shiny objects littering the floor, and I could tell that someone in a panic must have made some utensils fall. I needed to be careful not to step on knives or anything sharp. As I stood there in the kitchen, a strong hand gripped around my neck and I twisted my body in surprise. Holding a lighter with a small flickering flame, the leader of the guys used it to determine who I was and whether I was friend or foe. Although the light was small, it chased away most of the darkness in the kitchen, and I found it interesting how my eyes were adjusting to this new brightness. I looked at the guy and noticed claw marks around his face and neck. His expression showed a mixture of fear and hardship, and I'm sure that his encounter with the Midnight Man had to have been horrifying. I was so lucky it didn't try harder to get me. "What happened?" I asked. "No time. I remember the thing got some of the others. I ran, remembered I had a lighter. How do we stop the game?" The way his eyes looked in the light was kinda dark, which sounds funny, I know. Before I could answer, we both heard a door slam open and footsteps slowly walking around. We both dropped to the floor, hiding behind a counter, none of us making a peep. "All we gotta do is relight that candle before 3:33 a.m., I whispered. The footsteps seemed like they were getting closer, so I told him to close the lighter. The guy leaned back and must have scooted into a utensil or something, because it made a loud scraping sound as it slid against the floor. The footsteps stomped loud and fast, and the Midnight Man came right to the entrance of the kitchen before stopping. None of us moved. As it walked towards the right of the kitchen, I motioned for us to move to the left, slowly. It's really hard to do when there's dishes randomly scattered across the kitchen floor. Somehow, we managed to crawl out of the kitchen. We got up and started making our way to the basement. "We gotta risk it and run. It'll get us at this rate," the guy said. I agreed, and we ran as fast as we could. But as the guy was running, he fell over and yelled to me that the Midnight Man grabbed his leg and was trying to drag him away. I reached out to grab him, but he told me there was no time and slid the lighter towards my direction. I grabbed it and ran to the basement. I tried to spark a flame with the lighter, but it wasn't working, and I could feel the Midnight Man coming. It was horrible timing. I turned and saw the Midnight Man at the top of the stairs, a dark silhouette with an indescribably creepy face. You just had to be there to see how disturbing it was. It let out a silent scream, which didn't seem possible, and as it lunged toward me, the lighter finally worked and I turned my back to light the candle. The lights in the house flickered back on and the Midnight Man vanished. I felt this internal happiness, the likes of which I'd never experienced before. I went into the living room and the other guys joined me, and I gotta say, they looked out of their minds. After that moment, we all were. But most of all, we were just glad it was over. "You did it! Thank goodness," one of them said. One after another, they all started handing out praises to me, and I felt so proud of myself. But I was the one who started it all, so I didn't feel too proud. "How did you know how to end it?" they asked. I told them that the goal was to relight the candle before 3:33 a.m., which is exactly what I did. "But you didn't," someone said. I didn't get what they meant, so I checked my watch. It said 3:36 a.m. I gulped and then realized something. Wait, how did you know that it was me who relit the candle? I backed away and prepared for the worst as they all stared blankly at me. I was never the same after that moment happened, and it led me to believe that these online marketplaces are all truly shady in nature. Not that this is too important to know, but I'm basically your average old man, trying hard to see the meaning in life after living for so long. But don't think I'm that old. Apparently, I'm just getting there. Anyways, I don't believe in this new age technology that keeps getting made. Back in my day, less was more, but now it seems that more is less. People want things done yesterday, leaving people like me days behind. My son's kids would often come over and tell me how inconvenient my life must be with so little technology around. But I only have what I need, and I don't need a lot. One time, and it was this time that really started everything, they told me about this new website where you could buy almost anything that was advertised all over the place. They waved around their phones and iPads and computers my son had got them as they excitedly told me that I should order something off there. As usual, I just laughed them off, saying that there wouldn't be anything I'd need to buy off there. But they insisted that I at least give it a try, and if there's anything I can't stand, it's my grandchildren getting all disappointed. I told them that I would check it out later, but didn't guarantee I'd buy anything, which satisfied them. The day went by pretty quickly as I spent a good time with them and my son. I almost completely forgot about what I'd said I'd do until I was just about to go to sleep. Reluctantly, I turned on my computer and racked through my brain to remember what the website called. Oh yeah, Temu. I typed it in. The website had lots of things to buy, from random household objects to clothing. Nothing that I'd want to get, but it did look promising. I spent the next 10 minutes scrolling down through what they had to offer, believing in what my grandchildren had said. It looked convenient, legit, promising. I could see people buying from this in the future. I kept scrolling down and started noticing the more I scrolled, the more random and strange the products started to get. One showed a piece of clothing titled, "My Grandmother's Pants." Another showed a bin of Pop-Tart titled, "Used Pop-Tart." Was this some sort of joke? Just as I was beginning to gain respect, I was instantly starting to lose it. And there was one that caught my eye and made me reread and reread the title again and again. The background of the website appeared darker and maybe glitchier around this product. It showed a picture of a dark, glitchy forest background with something standing behind a tree. It was a dark figure, and the picture had so much noise in it that you couldn't tell exactly what it was. The title of it was Pet Dogman. I was so intrigued by what the description of this product was that I clicked on it. You know when you experience a strong feeling that causes you to react without realizing it? That was basically what caused me to click on it without thinking. The description was short but interesting. It read, "One of the greatest creatures you could ever encounter. This dogman likes to roam around and explore. It also likes treats." I scrolled down to see if there were any reviews, and surprisingly there actually were. One read, "Best purchase I ever got." Another read, "I never would have believed it, but it came." I wasn't aware of the concept of fake reviews until after the whole incident occurred, so I thought that real people left them. Maybe there's the smallest possibility that some did. I highly doubt that though. I don't know what kind of demonic energy must have persuaded me to buy it. Perhaps because I didn't know what a dogman was, but I pressed buy faster than I could ever expect. Unexpectedly, it said it would arrive later tonight. Exhausted, I went to bed, hoping that with this purchase my grandchildren would be more than satisfied. That night, in the back of my head, I could hear shuffling noises somewhere in the house. At one point, I think I got up to check on the kids, saw they were okay, and went back to sleep. My son was in the room right across from mine, and he was sound asleep as well. But every time I thought I would fall completely asleep, I was woken up by unexplainable noises. I opened my eyes and saw that it was only 3 a.m. Clearly, I wasn't going to fall asleep easily, which was very unusual. I usually sleep like a baby the second my eyes are shut, but because my body was up and awake, I decided I would get something to eat from the kitchen. I got up and slowly walked down the hallway, feeling like there was something different about my house. I could feel it. With every step, something mysterious followed right behind. I suddenly could feel a cold breeze hitting me in the face, and as I followed this breeze, I saw with pure shock and terror that the front door of my house was completely open wide. It swayed back and forth slightly from the wind pushing against it. I stood there for a moment in horror, but snapped out of it and closed the door, making sure to lock it tight. The scariest part was that I always leave the door locked shut, so somebody must have forced it open somehow. But without making a big sound, I was sure everyone would have heard someone forcing the door open. Thoughts were traveling through my mind at the speed of light, but I knew that right now we needed to leave the house. It was definitely not safe. But as I was about to run and wake everyone up, I heard a low, guttural growl that almost gave me a heart attack. Standing a few feet behind me was the biggest thing I've ever seen in my life. It was huge. It was furry. It was unreal. In that moment, one word swirled around my head unrelentingly. Dogman. I could see it. Its dog-like appearance mixed with that of a brute beast. Although some parts of it looked thin and unfed, others looked muscular and threatening. It was in a class all of its own. It breathed heavily, its eyes glowing ever so slightly, fixated on me. From the looks of it, my Temu package had arrived, but it was not what I was expecting. For once, I hoped my package wouldn't come, that it would be some sort of scam, but that just wasn't true. The dogman growled a little more, taking a huge step forward on its bulky hind legs. I took a step back, almost falling backwards. Its presence almost completely drained all my energy. The dogman gave a loud, indescribable roaring noise that almost made me deaf and came even closer to where I was. In a flash, the hallway lights went on as my son ran to the scene in a panic. He stopped as soon as he saw the creature, and I turned to look at him with increased annoyance. My grandchildren followed behind, and with wide eyes, one asked if it was a werewolf and where it had come from. Actually, I told them, that's what I ordered off Temu. You what? My son yelled, but then piped down as the dogman crouched aggressively, looking ready to do something. My son, in a low, non-aggressive sounding tone, told me to open the door so that he could try to get the dogman to leave the house. With no other options available, I did what he said, slowly and carefully. But when I opened the door, the dogman leaped forward at me, claws ready to slice me. I slid out of the way, and it slid forward out the door. My son raced to shut it, and almost flew forward as the dogman pushed against it. The grandchildren looked scared out of their minds as they watched while holding each other. After a couple of minutes of trying, it seemed either uninterested or bored, and left to who knows where. We all agreed to not sleeping for the rest of the night, and not ever ordering anything that looked even remotely suspicious. I know I never expected to be delivered an actual creature. I contacted Temu about it, and they never admitted to anything. When I tried looking for the Dogman product again, it disappeared as though it never existed. To this day, I'm very hesitant about buying most things, and maybe after this, you are too. Let's hope that you never end up seeing anything like I did, because that kind of experience is something like out of a horror film. So, would you order off Temu? The camping trip with my family was meant to be a peaceful escape from life's daily annoyances, but little did I know it would soon transform into an unforgettable and chilling experience. We arrived at the campsite with increasing excitement and started setting up our tents and chatting with each other. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a glow upon the forest, we gathered around the crackling campfire, its warm, flickering light dancing playfully on our faces. The night air was laced with the earthy scent of pine and the gentle rustling of leaves in the wind. The symphony of crickets and distant hooting of owls created a serene ambience that usually lulled me into a peaceful slumber. However, that night, tranquility gave way to an unsettling aura as the campfire's flames seemed to lose their cheerful vigor. Lying in my large tent, I noticed the subtle shift in the atmosphere. I suddenly couldn't hear any crickets, owls, or anything else that showed signs of life in the forest, just my own breathing. An eerie stillness settled over the forest, and a strange unease crept into my bones. My family members were in their tents and had fallen asleep almost instantly. Just as I was beginning to drift into sleep, my ears perked up at the sound of a distant growl. At first, I dismissed it as an ordinary forest noise, perhaps a wandering animal or the echo of a nocturnal creature's call. But the growl persisted, and it seemed to grow closer, more distinct. It was a low, guttural sound, causing the fine hairs on the back of my neck to stand on end. My heart quickened its pace, and I dared not move, afraid to draw any attention to myself. Even though I was feeling apprehensive, I couldn't help but wonder what it was that was lurking in the dark. So I got out of my tent and walked into the lonely forest. Unfortunately, it didn't take me long to find what was making the growling noises. Deciding it'd be best to turn back and go to sleep, I stopped from going deeper into the forest and was about to turn around. But that was when I saw it. There it stood, a monstrous form bathed in shadow, just beyond the reach of the dwindling campfire's light. My breath caught in my throat, and my pulse pounded like the thunderous hooves of a stampede. The creature, unlike anything I'd ever seen, seemed like a haunting amalgamation of a massive, ferocious canine and a man. Its eyes glowed unsettling red hue, piercing the darkness like fiery embers. Rows of razor-sharp teeth glistened maliciously, and its breath came out in growls that reverberated through the trees, sending fear coursing through my veins. In that fleeting moment, as my wide eyes locked with the dogman's haunting gaze, I felt like an intruder into an ancient world, a trespasser amid the realms of folklore and legend. My mind struggled to comprehend the creature's existence, my thoughts ricocheting between rationality and the supernatural. Monsters aren't real, silly, I thought to myself. You're clearly seeing things. Fear paralyzed me for a moment, but a survival instinct took over, urging me to flee before too late. Without a second thought, I turned and ran as fast as my legs could carry me, guided only by the adrenaline coursing through my veins. The darkness seemed to envelop me like a suffocating shroud, but I pushed forward, knowing that the safety of our campsite was the only sanctuary left for me. Breathless and wide-eyed, I burst into my family's tent, trying to explain what I had just witnessed without taking the time to catch my breath. My voice trembled as I recounted the encounter with the terrifying dogman, but their sleepy eyes looked at me with disbelief. They assured me it was probably just my imagination running wild because of the spooky forest. Annoyed, they told me to go back to sleep and brushed off my concerns, attributing them to nothing more than the imaginings of an overactive mind. Could you believe this? Reluctantly, I crawled back into my tent, still trembling with fear and uncertainty. I could hear the faint crackling of the campfire and the rhythmic breathing of my family, but my mind was fixated on the chilling encounter I just experienced. Every rustle of leaves or snapping twig outside amplified my anxiety, making sleep feel like an impossible feat. As I finally forced myself to lay down and close my eyes, I swear I saw its shadow against my tent and heard it sniffing the tent and growling softly. And hoping it was my eyes and ears playing tricks on me, I forced my eyes shut, curled into a ball, and stayed as still as humanly possible. It felt like an eternity before slumber finally found me, but even in my dreams, the menacing image of the dogman haunted me. Its red eyes stared into my soul, and its growls echoed into the depths of my subconscious. I tossed and turned, unable to escape the clutches of the night's unsettling encounter. Morning eventually came, bringing with it a sense of relief and security. The sun's warm embrace brushed away the last remnants of darkness, and as we hiked back to civilization, the tranquility of the day began to soothe my troubled mind. Yet I couldn't shake off the feeling that the dogman might still be lurking in the shadows, watching us from afar. When we got home, I tried to convince myself that maybe I just imagined the whole thing. But a part of me couldn't forget what I saw and heard that night. It would always be a mysterious and scary memory, a strange encounter with something I couldn't explain, something that made me see the wild forest in a whole new way. It taught me to be respectful of nature and its mysteries, and that sometimes things can be way scarier than we ever imagined. After all, think about it, all it ever did was stare back. But after learning about the existence of other entities and never before, what do I know? The country is often described as a peaceful and wonderful place, but after the experience I had with my grandmother, I don't think of it as being very peaceful anymore. Just the opposite, actually. And it's because of the other things that live there. I was just your average teenage girl visiting her grandparents' house during summer break. I didn't think I'd be doing too much while I was there, mostly just helping my grandmother with her chores, like I had during other times. Anyways, my dad dropped me off at her house, and I was about to give her a hug when she suddenly shouted at me. "Don't take a single step forward. Stay back," she cried out. Alarmed, I fell backwards and followed her eyes as she looked down. Creeping out of the bushes that were right next to her porch was a black cat with golden-looking eyes. I recognized that cat instantly because it was her cat, named Ruffles. It's been a while since that day, but I could have sworn then, and could swear now, that I noticed her glaring at them. But she quickly stopped and started laughing out loud. "I'm just pulling your leg," she giggled. "Yeah, real funny," I sarcastically laughed. But even though she'd gone back to being her usual cheerful, quirky self, I could tell that something wasn't quite right. As I was thinking that, my grandmother went back inside, and Ruffles rubbed against my leg affectionately. I picked her up and went inside after Grandma. As we were chatting energetically, she told me about the grand adventures she'd have while taking care of her garden. Personally, I've never cared much for plants, and I probably have the fastest record for killing one in less than a week. But I had to admit, my grandmother made it sound and feel fun. I remember laughing as she told me that one time she thought a wolf had hidden in one of her bushes as she was repotting a succulent outside. Now, before I go on, I need to let you know that her tone had gotten deeper and darker with every word. She told me that she thought she'd heard whimpering coming from it and decided it must have been a dog. She approached it slowly, trying to calm it down. But when she was right in front of the bush, the sound suddenly stopped. She then heard the whimpering noise a bit farther away. Thinking that the animal could be hurt, she followed the sound around her house and went into her backyard. Being that she lives in the country, there's a lot of forest everywhere, and her backyard leads right into it. As she finally thought that she'd come closer to the source of the sound, once again it got farther and was coming straight from in the forest. She knew right then and there that something much more was going on. I remember how she told me it was like something was watching her and how she felt uneasy being in her own backyard. And after she thought she heard the sound come closer to her again, she rushed back inside her house and stayed there all night. But she couldn't sleep a wink that night and kept hearing the same whimpering voice outside her bedroom window. And even though she thought that it was coming from like somewhere away, she could have sworn that she heard another noise, and it sounded like a person's voice calling out her name. Like something straight out of a horror movie, and I honestly couldn't believe it. I just brushed it off as one of her stories and told her that she had a big imagination. She laughed and agreed, going off to the kitchen to make me some lunch, and I spent some quality time with Ruffles. As I was petting her and giving her belly rubs, I saw something dark on my hand that felt wet. I brought it up to my face and gasped in surprise. "Grandma! Grandma! I think Ruffles hurt herself." I sat her down on the couch and pushed Grandma over to where she was, but they were gone. I showed her my hand, and she looked at it in some kind of daze. Then she went back into the kitchen as though I'd said nothing, and I sat back down stunned, wondering what her silence meant. It got darker, and my grandmother finally finished making dinner. We sat at the table in a new silence that I wasn't used to from her. Then she got up, pushed back the window blinds from the kitchen window, looked through, let them fall back, and walked over to me. And in a somewhat faint voice, she spoke. "Ruffles is definitely outside again. If you see her, don't let her in." "What? What are you saying? She's always allowed in," I replied. My grandmother shook her head, and I could feel the tension in the room grow. I asked her why she said that, and she didn't answer. Then I asked her again, and she shut her eyes, not saying anything. Furious, I told her that if she didn't tell me, I would let her back in. And the second after I said that, she shouted out the one thing I would never have been prepared to hear. "Because that's not Ruffles." Blood drained from me. I felt cold and frail. I fumbled my words as I tried to ask her what she meant, and was as frozen as a statue. "Do you know what a skinwalker is?" my grandmother asked. I shook my head, and she told me that apparently they're monsters that take the skin of other animals and wear them. She told me that that's all she knew about them, and that they were dangerous creatures that lived around her house. At first, She didn't know what to think of the strange noises she heard, but then she heard from the few neighbors miles away from her about them, and that was when she understood. So, you're saying that a skinwalker to Ruffles? I was trying hard not to say the words I really didn't want to hear, but I knew that I could never escape from the truth. Having no strength to stay up, after hearing what happened to Ruffles, I went off to the room I'd be sleeping in. It was right next to my grandmother's, and it had a window right across my bed. That night, I tossed and turned and had horrible nightmares about Ruffles. I had even woken up and thought I saw Ruffles, no, the Skinwalker, using Ruffles' eyes to stare at me through the bedroom window. But I passed out too quickly to really know. All I can confirm is that I felt like I was really sick. A few days passed, and neither Grandma nor me had seen the missing cat. Nothing creepy happened, and it was nice to finally have some good days. The next day, I packed up my stuff as I was waiting for Dad to come pick me up. I gave a hug goodbye to my grandmother and was about to go into the car when I mysteriously stopped. I really can't explain why I suddenly stopped. It's like my body sensed something and immediately reacted to it. I turned to face the forest and saw Ruffles crouched down next to a tree, staring intently at me. It's like the eyes were staring into my very being, but for some reason I didn't feel fear. "Goodbye, Ruffles," I whispered. I waved a quick goodbye, not to the Skinwalker, but to her. She had been a great cat, and I would never forget her. I got in the car, and as Dad drove away, I watched my grandmother smiling. "See you," she yelled. But I noticed something. She had never opened her mouth once. She had just been waving. So, I'm guessing it must have come from it, the Skinwalker. Nowadays, I make sure to visit as much as possible, mostly for my grandmother's sake. So far, I haven't been having any other encounters with it. But why would I? I would hope for anybody the country remains a peaceful, amazing place. Because they are out there, and they are extremely dangerous. Hope you enjoyed that story, and I'll see you in the next one. See you on the flip side.